Brilliant. Well, we'll kick off. Everybody's very welcome to Startup Stories, our series of stories with founders that have built startups and are starting to grow and scale and are happy to share their journey with us here at Raise. We're excited because we are both in person and online, our first hybrid startup story. So we've got a room of startup founders and the Raise team, plus Chris Gregg and myself, along with founders and startups online. So delighted to kick off the conversation. And thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today. I had a good chat with Chris back in August at an event in Belfast, and it was great to actually hear the Lightyear story because I'd seen your journey, but I hadn't really heard about it too much. So I was delighted for you to come along and share that with the wider group. So yeah, let's love to hear your elevator pitch. We're talking about elevator pitches for what Lightyear is. Let's start there.
I have a sales team that do that for me. What a Lightyear do. So we do we're a B2B focused business, and we do procurement and accounts payable automation in the cloud. And what that basically means is we help larger SMEs, mid-market businesses automate their all elements of the procure to pay cycle. So data extraction from their supplier bills and credits, and removing all that data entry, removing all the accounting coding, and then we provide a really intuitive approvals workflow. So big businesses, a lot of their problems are around the control on ordering and making sure certain people approve things within budget, and then once they get invoiced from supply chain, making sure that the bill doesn't always get paid without being approved by different people. And every business has a different workflow or requirements. So we have a platform where you can customize your own specific workflow, and then we do some fraud prevention measures like checking the bank details, making sure that those are the registered bank details, things like that. So that's the basics of what we do, and then we do a whole pile of other stuff around that, but with an interest of time, that's the basics of what we're focused on.
I mean, that sounds like the back end of a business, all the heavy lifting that nobody else wants to do, and if it's all automated, it's fantastic. So where did the idea come from? Are you from an accounting background, or did you just see that? I mean, a lot of our founders see problems that they want to solve and build businesses. Is that where you came from?
Yeah, so it's funny to say, like, no one wants to do the back office stuff, right? No one sets out in life to be like a bookkeeper, to be honest, right? Despite what they might say, there is some weird people that maybe they do want to be bookkeepers, but most people, they're not interested. Right? Everyone does their jobs and they want to focus on their jobs, growing the business or doing whatever. They don't want to be spending their time doing operational stuff. But no, to answer your question specifically, I was not an accountant. I was in the operations side. So what we do touches across all areas of the business. It's in the accounting and the finance function, but it's also operationally, because it's a big operational role as well. So I was running operations for a hospitality company in Sydney. Moved out to Sydney in 2007. And my brother actually was out there too in the same business and doing a similar type of role. So the two of us were looking at how we could do process change automation in that business, and we started looking. Accounts payable was the last thing we looked at. So we looked at all the front of house stuff, the marketing, automation, and all that stuff, and then we got to accounts payable, and we were spending about $4 or $5 million a quarter on the AP team with 10 people in head office. There was typing data, and we had all the paper bills floating around everywhere. Suppliers were overcharging us, and we didn't know because we weren't checking the pricing. Whole pile of pain points and things like that. So from an operational perspective, we were like, right, let's try and find a solution. In the market, there were small solutions that just weren't robust enough, and there were enterprise solutions that were really rubbish. Install scanners across your entire business and basically employ an IT team to manage them, really unintuitive and stuff. So, but there was nothing in the middle, which is for a larger business, larger requirements, and a SaaS model, easy to get going, intuitive, and we have no tech background whatsoever. So anybody who doesn't have tech background, I've done all right. So don't worry about that, rock and roll. So we said, right, kind of thought about it. We had a few bottles of wine one night, and we mapped out our very first sort of product prototype with some socks and shoes and wine bottles on the floor. It was all great and made a lot of sense that night. And then we decided to do it. We were like, we're at a stage of our careers, probably we love what we did, but probably ready to do something different. So we thought, we'll do this tech. At the time, and if you're familiar with maybe Xero with an X, Xero, so they were just emerging in New Zealand and just starting this ecosystem concept. And they built an open platform with APIs. And this all sounded very attractive, very easy. They made it sound very easy, right? Just plug in a couple of days dev, wasn't that easy, obviously, but yes, that was a real catalyst for us as well. So I think we also, followed the rising tide, was the Arrow's progress back then. So yeah, left the jobs, hired a couple of developers from Westpac Group, who are Westpac's one of the big four banks, really good guys, and they came in basically. So myself and my co-founder did all the business strategy, sales, marketing, and then our two developers led the stack.
Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my next question. It's one of the hardest part as an industry founder is finding technical guys or girls to help you out in terms of building things. So it's fantastic to find that talent and bring them on board nice and early, which is brilliant. So give me a little flavour, the process of building that and maybe taking it to market. We talk about a lot of overnight successes in terms of, the Facebooks of the world as a bad example, but you think it's overnight success, but it takes a couple of years to build these things and to take them to market. Roughly, how long is a piece of string did that take?
Yeah, so good question. We focus, because we do B2B, we solve complex challenges, and typically that means you don't get an overnight success. What it does mean is, though, you get a more business with much more longevity, because you can get a customer that's super sticky. These overnight successes like a Facebook and consumer focused, they're great because you can get people like that, but they can also drop off. It's maybe a one-time transactional sort of model, but with a B2B software like ours, it's super sticky. So you work harder, there's a longer sales cycle, ingestion cycle, but once they're in. We have our attrition rate is less than 2% per annum. So basically, once you're in, unless you go out of business, we've lost one client in 3 years because they actually decided to leave. So how long was that journey, right? So we started that 2010, started cutting some code 11. Took us about 2 years to get MVP out. So there was no money coming in at that point. We chose to bootstrap, mortgage to houses and all that sort of jazz. And our two co-founding developers came on, and there was the equity, equity for them. So they pretty much worked for Beans as well. So, initially it was Beans on toast, loved it. Yeah. So that's how we sort of did the first 2 years. We all just worked and didn't really take any cash out, and just very frugal. Didn't go out much. So 2 years to build, got an MVP out. It's like quite basic. But the way we looked at this, which I think is a great way to evaluate most initial MVPs, we found the biggest pain point. We looked at all the pain points. There's 20, 30, 40 pain points that we ultimately wanted to get to. It was like, what's the biggest one we can solve that we can charge for, right? And for that, it was basically give people the ability to have a digital mailbox to get their documents in. So cut the paper out and then strip out the data. So we basically focused on building a digital mailbox and a data extraction tool.
It saves so much time and all that data.
That's it. And all the data, and we stripped out line by line data, which just saves loads more money. It gives businesses then more rich insights, right? Because on a bill, if I'm buying £1,000 from supplier A, that's great. I know I bought £1,000 of something from supplier A. If I know within that £1,000 I bought these 30 different products at this different price, well, I now know what I'm buying. I can look at price trends over time. So there's a lot of value in that. So we very, very narrow said mailbox extraction. That's it. Very simple UI. Get that out first, and then businesses were willing to pay for it. So that allowed us to get revenue in early, and that's always how we think about approaching any of the ventures or businesses that we're involved in. Yeah. It's how do we try and get revenue payback as soon as possible.
The accounts payable piece goes across a number of industries, like everything from construction to government to. So was there any particular industry you went after first that you knew or your contacts with? Or?
Indeed, yeah. So you stick with what you know initially, right? So for a number of reasons, you kind of know the user pain points really, really in depth, but also you, in theory, hopefully got some networks you can leverage to get early adopters and things. So coming from hospitality, our first client was the hospitality business we were in, right? Because we left it, right? Got the solution now, and we deployed it in there. So they were our first beta user. Really supportive guys, and then from there we focused on hospitality. The stack was skinned up from a go-to-market perspective as a hospo accounts payable solution, so that was good. And then that I would encourage anyone to consider that. Our stack could solve for any business. It wasn't hospo specific at all, but from that marketing, that allowed us to get momentum and pick a niche and start to get some cluster selling going on. And we went. Although we were SaaS, in theory you could sign up anywhere, but we just went a bit old school. We started in Sydney with this chain, and then we basically went to all the other chains around them and all the other hospital groups around them. We just had this sort of global approach to sales. So it was hospo, but then over time we expanded. Well, expanded just means we just do different marketing around it.
And I've got to ask $1,000 question: what brought you back to Belfast? In terms of Sydney beaches, come back to Belfast. Is it the market? Is it the opportunity? Is it coming Northern Hemisphere? I'm sure there's probably a lot of factors played into it.
There is definitely not the weather.
No,
that's for sure. So to fill in the blanks before I get to the last question, before I came back to that, we sold that business in 2014 to Intuit, here US multinational, QuickBooks, TurboTax, and some other stuff. We sold that to them in May 14, and then I spent 3 years with Intuit, initially in Sydney, and then I moved to Silicon Valley and did about 18 months there, running their partnerships division. It was great because I got to basically meet hundreds of other startups and scale-ups in the Valley, which was fantastic. So that was great. And then why did I come back here? So I kind of got jack of corporate, done our 2-year golden handcuffs, and we were free. So we did an evaluation. I was in the Valley, my brother was in Sydney, and we did the commercials. We're like, right, start a business in the Valley, like forget about that.
Yeah.
Start a business in Sydney isn't a whole lot cheaper, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. And then I just had my first kid. My parents are, thankfully still alive at the minute, so they have no other grandchildren. So 50% was right. Go to Belfast. We're going to do a business for a third of the cost. We can spend some time with family, get some babysitting support. So there's those elements.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then to your point, there was also the elements of being able to then do the UK and be headquartered here, bigger market than Australia, but also Australia is very difficult to manage the US from. It's impossible, just time zones. Here's a lot better. So yeah, here also gave us that ability to manage North America and the Europe market as well. So those are the main reasons.
Fascinating journey to come back to Belfast, and then I guess what next? You're from today. You're here. You're in Belfast. You're growing. You're scaling. You're 3 years in. That's a fantastic success story that we'd seen back in October. You want to share a bit of that, where you are now and where you think you're going to head to next?
Yeah. So grow. No matter what way we go, we'll grow. It's definitely enough. We're going upwards. Just how that journey looks, we're still debating. So we're at a stage where we're bootstrapped this one with no external investment. I'm open to external investment. I always prefer, if you can, to hold it as long as you can, build as much value as you can, not have to worry about boards and investors. That's a big distraction and stuff like that. So personally, I'm in favor of, if you can, go your own as much as you can, but I'll balance that out to say that if you're at the right point and capital can really change the trajectory, you should take it, But yeah, we're bootstrapped. We're about 4,000 businesses. We're doing about 2.5, 3 million annualized at the minute, growing. Should do 100% this year growth. So everything's sort of in the right trajectory. We will either stay bootstrapped and just grow. We've got a good roadmap at the minute that we don't need money to grow quite aggressively, and we'll go into North America this year. They're going to set up an office in Canada. So that's the organic path we can take. But there's also VCs and private equities knocking on the door quite a lot. Yeah, it's a good time to be getting money if you want it. So
yeah, it's really good to have both options available, and you can pick and choose as to what right time and what works best. And we talk about that a lot with our founders in terms of their vision and making sure that they're on the right path for them, particularly taking into their work balance and their family, and because it can be long hours and stressful, what's right for them and what's the right time to scale and get the right team and the right map around you, because there's a lot of sharks out there that can put bad terms in place and push the founders to the wall, and that's not great either. When what's the vision, where do you want to go with this, from an exit perspective or from a growth perspective or a dividend perspective. There's lots of different ways of taking these companies to market, so and growing them successfully. But yeah, I think it's a really exciting story, and I'd love to see if there's any questions from the room or from online. I'll have a wee quick look on the chat here. Nothing coming through yet from the room.
So what's your new business you're doing? Is it the same as what you're doing in Sydney? Well, not exactly the same, clearly.
Very similar. First one, 1.2, right? We thought about all these different ideas, other areas to go into, and we ended up saying, like, what we did is still wide open. There's less than 4% saturation in our particular segment of the market in the English-speaking countries. So we said, this is ridiculous. We've done this before. We had a whole pile of mistakes. We burned a load of cash. In theory, we'll hopefully not do those again. We'll make new mistakes and burn cash in different ways that we probably shouldn't. But like, we know it. we've got the knowledge, we could literally get a running start, and the segment's still open. So it was a no-brainer for us, to be honest, to go back in. So yeah, we're largely doing exactly the same basic stuff, but building that out low, starting to look into building payments. So we'll become a payments provider as well, but outbound payments. So there's a lot of innovation at the minute on inbound payments, tons of options, but not so much on businesses paying outwards.
Yeah.
So we'll look to start to build out and leverage open banking and things like that. So yeah, it's exciting.
Laura?
Yeah, you've obviously been incredibly successful at what you did. If you were to go back and do it all over again, fresh from the start, what advice would you give yourself, or what would be your biggest lesson maybe that you learned?
Yeah, it's a great question. I haven't been asked that one before. It's a very obvious question to ask though, but I haven't really been asked that. What advice did I give myself? What mistakes did we do? So be careful on your co-founders. Be the first thing I'd be very wary of. Make sure, you're trying to get something started and you're like, I need to get moving, and I need people to start building, and you feel the pressure, and you go and you just get someone, right? These people are, you're going to be closer to them than you're going to be your partner, right? You've got I'm thinking two guys probably, I don't know what the dynamic is there.
I think we knew each other for a long time before we started our challenge.
You spend so much time with these guys, and you're intrinsically linked. So that's probably the biggest advice. Just get the culture fit right. The culture is more important than the skill set. It's gotta work from that perspective. So that'd be the first thing I'd do. Second advice I would give myself is I wish I hadn't sold it when I did sell it, because it could have been a lot bigger than when we sold. But like hindsight's a wonderful thing. You never look back. But we probably sold that one too soon. And then the other thing we probably made mistakes on, we probably weren't focused enough in terms of looking at the bigger picture and building the roadmap to the bigger picture. We would get sales opportunities when you're young, cash, right? And, you only have 1 tin of beans left in the cupboard. So you're like, well, if they're going to give me $5,000, maybe I'll just build that. It'll take me a week, and throughout the course of the year, you do that 10, 15 times. All of a sudden, 6 months or 12 months, and you're dead. You've kind of just wasted by doing little bits and bobs that really don't move the needle. So our advice would be not sweat so much over the day-to-day cash flow. Focus on what's really going to move the needle big time. And if you need to just get some cash in some way short term, just to cover that, that's what we should have done. We would have been way further ahead on the global scale than the approach we did, which was just do this and that, sort of to pay the bills week by week.
Yeah, I think on the co-founders one was an interesting one. I was on a call with Adrian from Lilio. We had him on a while back, and he said, if your co-founders aren't helping you push that sled up that hill and they're sitting on top of it, it's time to move them off, So you want everybody to kind of help push the business forward. And
the one thing, Claire, is to add to that, you just prompted something. You said about moving them on.
Yeah.
That's really critical as well. Pick your co-founder well, but ideally you would want to retain, if it's your idea and you're not literally both founding it at the same time, but someone coming in as a secondary co-founder, definitely try as best you can to keep the control, make sure the earnings and things have all the right terms. But if it doesn't work out, you can get out clean. Try not to, and it's difficult if you're a non-tech founder and your co-founder's the tech, but you ideally want to try and mitigate as much as possible so that it basically doesn't become them, because then you can be leveraged.
You can't walk away with your tech. Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing to sort of get right, but as best you can, try and protect yourself.
Yeah, and then any questions from on the Zoom at all?
Martin Chris has a question. Martin, do you want to shout it out there?
I'll try. I'm not sure if everybody can hear me.
Oh, we can.
Well, that's a good start. Everybody can hear me. First of all, Jenny, my apologies for not being there today. I'd hoped to be there for the whole day for co-working, but as happens in the business, you get a disaster every now and again. I've had a bit of a disaster this morning, but I'm here and it's getting better. Chris,
I appreciate the time out.
Chris, on that subject of disaster, we all plan for success, but as part of your business planning, do you also plan for failure? Do you also plan for recovery if something goes wrong?
Yeah, we do. We do. We do it in a number of ways. So first of all, in terms of like cash flow, so we always keep a buffer. We're not super aggressive. A lot of businesses just go out and spend everything you have as quickly as you can and just go for hyper growth. We're a bit more traditional in that sense. We always keep a buffer. So for example, when the last lockdowns hit in Australia is one of our main revenue markets. Lockdown hit in August, and the government shut us down. We had planned to put 5 or 6 more people in. We just paused that. We said, no, let's just pause that. Let's see how we go, keep the buffer. In hindsight, we could have, because revenues didn't go down that much, but we definitely, from a cash flow perspective, personally, we never go to the wire. We always keep enough in reserve. We always keep enough in reserve. We would say, if we lost our top 20% client revenue, could we consume that, right? Again, we base that off our attrition numbers. So if you're a business that has maybe got a higher attrition number, or maybe you're much more exposed to a main client that's maybe bringing in 50% of your revenue, that's a different thing to think about. Then like, well, what happens if they leave, right? And again, then there's contractual security you can seek there. So trying to get certain people locked into longer term contracts, or a wean-off, contract, so that if they do give you notice, well, it's 6 months notice, and we still get our revenue for 6 months, so you can then prepare. So those are some of the areas we do. And obviously the usual stuff, like just making sure your security is in place, your insurance policies. Don't be saving 500 quid and you get your insurance in, right? So if the shit hits the fan, the insurances and stuff are in place. So those are some of the areas, Martin, that we think about that.
Yeah, it's the hardest thing, moving even out from industry and out from technical and becoming a CEO. All of a sudden you have more responsibilities, and particularly when you're building a team as well. So as Chris mentioned, if you've got a team, you're talking maybe of scaling your team, 20, 30, 40, to have cash flow, that if something goes wrong, you can still afford to pay your team. And I think that back to the culture piece, and that's so important to make sure that there's a bit of a buffer there, because you can't lose your team and get them back tomorrow.
No.
One of your most valuable assets.
I'd say the most valuable asset in any. I don't care about our tech, about anything. It's our people. Your people, good people. Good people are very hard to find. You can find okay people. You can find good people, but good people, they're a dime a dozen. Right? They're really hard to find great people that have the skill and the work ethic and experience and everything to take you forward. So my approach is, make good people, look after them. Right? If you bring someone in, I bring all people on a certain level, but if within 3-6 months I see that somebody's an absolute keeper, just do whatever you need to do. Make them feel warm and fuzzy, to get them locked in. It was a wee bit of equity, maybe something like that, because it's so hard to find people initially, and then when you churn people, to your point, particularly in tech. In tech, if you work somewhere for 2 years, built up so much knowledge, if you churn out, disaster time, like the amount of ramp time someone's going to take to come in and deliver what they're delivering at an output, because it can just be a killer on your growth. So big advocate of, don't be greedy and do the right thing by the good people and get your core team locked in.
Is that one of the challenges? You mentioned about 50 staff now, is it, in Belfast?
No, we can go to 50 in our office, but we currently got about 25 Belfast and about 15 in Australia. It's about 40 globally.
So how do you find culturally working across different markets and different regions and things? Is that smooth sailing, or does everyone play nicely and everything?
Yeah, smooth sailing across the markets. Probably one of the challenges between the dev and the non-devs. no, our devs are great. Just recorded, right? Everyone's great. No, we're lucky. Well, I guess we're very similar cultures, because our guys are either UK or Australia. Yeah. Very similar banter, pretty low key beers, very similar. When we think about expanding into North America, I've worked in North America, as you know, that will present certain challenges. Just saying certain things, saying the language and how you speak, and just dropping in bits of banter that might be offensive because they don't get the local context. So I think there's certainly be things to work through there, but I also think it's a great opportunity. Our guys are super excited about starting to work with people from America, like Americans or something like cool shiny object, people like you. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities as well, and expose people, like even we sort of did some like Diwali celebrations and things. Half the guys didn't know what Diwali was, but when you're in the States with so many Indian descent, so I think it's a lot of opportunity. I'm not so concerned about it. It's something we've got to navigate.
I know you find growing the company internationally, the market, you said it's pretty much the product works here, the same in the States, same in Australia.
Yeah, so Commonwealth accounting companies, being UK, South Africa, EU and NZ, very easy. A couple of days code, change the GBP, the AUD and stuff like that.
Mhm.
America a little bit more, because they don't have a concept of VAT.
Yeah.
So different, right? Sales tax, and then it's just no purchase tax. So there was probably 2 months of work there. And I say 2 months of work to get us like localized MVP, localized. Then there's other things we would want to do, but there's enough there to sell. About 5% of our revenue currently comes from North America, and that's just organic. But that was one of the benefits. Again, thinking for you guys, and I don't really know everyone's individual tech stack, but trying to make that from day one set for your global scale. That's what we did. We built it from day one so that you could just tweak a few knobs and it's ready to rock. And thinking about something that's becoming big in our sector, and maybe particularly in any security aware areas, is localized hosting. So we're an AWS stack, so we didn't fully build it from day one to be localized distributed. We're now having to do that. It's causing us a few problems. So I would think about from day one, let's build this in such a manner where I can click the button and I can have a US server and an AU server, and all those customers will automatically route. Because for us in Canada, for example, you're not allowed to have data outside of Canada, it's enshrined in law. And I know like the US are a bit funny about it, Patriot Act. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing for global scale that we're finding is a pain point now. We got ISO certified last year, which is great for Europe and Australia. But now we're trying to do more in America, and everyone's asking us for SOC 2, which is a ISO times 10. It's a beast. So we're just trying to work out now, do we have to do it? Is it worth doing it now for the ROI we get? So, but again, just be aware of that. If you want to do business in those markets, there's the security components, there's the architecture components, but then there's also what we were saying, and there's also the cultural selling components, right? And then the insurance components and tax components. So for us, we've got our insurances in certain states. And then we've also got, if we cross certain thresholds in each state, it has a difference with 70 grand per annum. So if in a state you've more than 70 grand, you now need to do a local return, state return. So that's massive for you as a business. If you hit that threshold, you've got to put an accounting team in just to report out for the states. So those are some of the things that we're
just to
finding.
be aware of. And then if you do the payment thing, does that stray into regulated activities? Or?
It does if we do it ourselves or we partner. So if I get a partner who wants to give me a good revenue share, I'll probably go that route just to avoid all that hassle and focus on the other stuff. But it would definitely, if we did that ourselves, and if region by region payments licenses in every region, it's a nightmare. So partner is the way to go if we can get a good commercial agreement in place.
And how did you manage that transition from operations to tech entrepreneur? Like, did you have to go and self-learn, well, what the heck is code and what is going to be best for us to build this product? Or did you rely heavily just on engineers and their advice?
Yeah, I learned on the job on that one. So, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know code. I've had enough to do with my time, but never wanted to.
Do you think it's better not to know?
Sometimes I do. Well, yeah, most of the time. Sometimes you'd like to know what's going on, but most of the time not. So I learned on the job a lot. Obviously did a lot of reading and stuff like that. I think for me personally, my background, I'd already done a lot of the roles you do as a CEO. I'd already sort of been doing those roles in my operational capacity. But I had a steep learning curve on the sales and the marketing, right? I've had to learn how to sell SaaS to accountants and CFOs and stuff. I've never done that before. With all this digital marketing, I come in with zero knowledge of this social stuff and Google ads and everything. So a really steep learning curve. But I think as long as you have a mindset that you're hungry, I loved it every minute. Like then and now, work for me is not work. Best crack. I do it for free if I didn't have to put food on the table. So it's just that learning mindset's fantastic. For me as well, I try to be very transparent on what I do well, what I enjoy, and what I don't. For my team as well, there's no secrets on that. I don't particularly enjoy doing CEO stuff, to be honest. I'm more of a COO. It's my background. I love getting in the weeds. I love getting in with the product team and the customers and the day to day. I really don't enjoy PR. I don't enjoy that top. Like I would hate to have a board. I'm probably going to do it at some point, but be really clear on what you're doing. Also for me, thinking about you've got your own personal objectives, but you're at the end of the day, your company's your thing. So if in a year I'm not the right guy to be the CEO, I will be delighted to hand that off. I'll be honest, if I could find a great CEO now, I probably would. at this point, I'm probably too intrinsically linked. It's not the right time, but I think you've also got to be aware yourself for the business at what stage is it the right time to move on, especially when you get money in. You know, a lot of investors will give you a bit of runway, but they'll look to replace you potentially, you know, so something to be aware of as well as you think about money.
That's like the guy from Peloton this week getting moved on.
He's probably not before time.
But yeah, a bizarre roundabout story, but then you're starting to realize he thought he was Peloton, and he's not Peloton. Peloton is Peloton. He is him, and
Trying to separate the two.
you
And
need
it's,
that ability to separate is important.
it's really challenging from an industry perspective to learn the technical side of things, and it is, you know, reading books, listening to others, but actually as the CEO, you only need to do 10%. You need to know the lingo, and you need to know how that works, and then it's up to them, they're the expert, to go and do the deep dive and actually create the code or create the UI and come back. And as long as you're up at that 10% strategy level, and it's nearly project management early on, and then, you know, as you say, up into strategy, I think that's key. But knowing the lingo, it's like learning French.
It
A
is,
lot of some of the tech for non-tech events we'll have on YouTube, or we'll be running this year, hopefully to help upskill any industry founders that want some advice or input, and just ask. I think what's one of the good things about Northern Ireland and Ireland as a whole is you can pick up the phone and get an answer to a question, or get a cup of coffee for 10 or 15 minutes, and it takes you a long way. So that would be another piece of advice as well.
And are you open for acquisition again?
We never, well, to me and you, you're always thinking where you're going at the end of the day. We don't focus on acquisition. We focus on building a business, successful, sustainable, profitable, growing business. And then what we typically have found from our last venture and other angel investments I've made is if you do that, the acquisitions will come, the offers will come, but you're in a really strong position, whether it's acquisition or whether it's fundraise. If you're on a business that's going in the right trajectory and you're not losing cash and desperate for money, you're in the A position to negotiate, right? Say, come to me, make it interesting. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. So we don't build for it, but we're always obviously thinking about when we do partnerships and things like that. We always have a mindset to, can we partner with big organizations that, you know, might come in with a big paycheck at some point. So it's there, but not building specifically towards that.
I can ask one more, just so obviously you're passionate about bootstrapping. Well, traditionally bootstrapping can mean that you're much slower. You might be steadier in terms of your growth, but you're much slower. How did you mentally balance people criticizing your growth?
Yeah, so you always think you're missing out, right? You see all these stories, right? You think, oh, XYZ has done this and that, so that's fantastic, isn't it? But the way we look at it, there's a lot of risk. You hear the good stories, you don't hear about the 95% of businesses that have taken funding on, right? You look at the amount of business that you hear raise a Series A or B, and then look at how many do you actually hear about a Series C or D or list or IPO. There's a massive chasm, massive drop off. So you just got to be comfortable with your own journey, right? I don't care how quickly or slowly people around me are doing that, does not matter. Like, it's about Lightyear and about what we see as our own success internally. And for us, you know, bootstrapping for us hasn't meant we went slow. We certainly could have went quicker with money, right? But we've doubled, you know, last 3 years, so we're comfortable with that growth. Slower, but sustainable and steady, and the story's still great, right? And the other thing I personally have seen, I don't want to come across as an anti-money. I'm not. It's there, and there's definitely a time for it with the right investor. But over the years, I've seen a lot of businesses, and you know, specifically within Intuit, when I dealt with a lot of businesses, and my role was to try and take international businesses into the States and make them successful. So I saw a lot of people that raised 10, 15, 20 million go to the States, and 12, 18 months in, they were hightailing it back out, and they basically burnt their cash, and I own 25% less of the business. They had a set of unhappy board seats sitting there, and they were back to square one. They're actually going backwards than where they were 18 months. So I've seen the battle scars, whereas probably your day-to-day Joe blogs don't necessarily hear or learn about the battle scars, but there is plenty out there. So go for money if it's what you think it's the way to do to accelerate, but make sure the time's right and make sure the investors are right.
Do you think it's more difficult for people to raise over in Northern Ireland compared to the UK or even Australia?
I think it's getting better. I think the US is easy to raise money. If you're in the US, you get $50 million.
For an idea.
Decent idea. Like it's so easy to get money there. Particularly if you've got domain expertise, or you come at it with some value. Northern Ireland's been tough, I think, certainly since I've been here. I've done quite a lot of work with the Catalyst guys and Alan Watts before he finished up trying to help on that front and raise the profile. I think it's going well. That event we met at was a great step forward. But I think it is more difficult. Anytime we say where you're from, like, Dublin, right, Dublin's great texting, like, no, Belfast. Where's that? Okay. Titanic, yeah, got it. So yeah, I think it's harder. London's good at the minute. There's good data coming out of London in the last couple of years. I think, to be honest, it's a rising tide everywhere in the world right now. There's so much capital hanging around at the minute, particularly around private equity and VC as well. There's loads and loads of capital. There's not enough good ideas. Because I think the problem, 10, 15 years ago, particularly within fintech, there's so much opportunity, right? So just all the technology was, 15 years ago was hard to do. It was hard, right? But with all this tech, there's been so much opportunity. There's been great businesses emerge. And if you look across the category, if you sat today and said, where am I going to start a business that has true unicorn potential and global scale? You'd look across the site and you go, there's not a whole lot of like obvious open opportunities, right? So I think what that means is, from the investor's perspective, it's much harder for them to find potential winners than it was 5-10 years ago. And I think that's why there's a lot more capital involved. I was chatting to VC recently, a few initial chats, but they were looking for multi-unicorn. They were looking big picture, and we painted a really good picture that got us to sort of unicorny status at some point. But it's like, good, yeah, and that's good. You probably do that, but we want bigger, So they're all after the big thing, and I think just there's not that much stock on the market anymore, like stock for them in terms of good big scale. Because a P and a VC, if you go and say, yeah, I think I can get this to 20-30 million,
It's not much to them.
no interest to them, right? Let's be honest. So yeah, I think to answer the question, it's getting easier.
Do you think there's anything Northern Ireland can do to improve, like inward investment?
Yeah, I think they can stop bringing FDIs in to start. That's been my existence, because it's just hard, like talent. Like, if you're looking at startups and trying to find talent, it's super difficult at the minute. And that's because they come in and pay silly salaries, and like salaries are okay, but it's more like, for me, it's culture. If I look at any sort of people I looked at that came from FDI, culture is, least amount of hours, most amount of benefits. I think it's Sydney. I think when I was in the Valley, everyone who worked around me, they were busting 60, 70, 80 hours a week. They weren't getting paid for it. They loved it, right? I think there's unfortunately a bit of a civil service culture here, is what I'm saying. It's like, I just want to go and do the job. Whereas in the other cities I've lived, it's real excitement about what you can do, and and I think that's really lacking here. So I think how can we fix that? Probably the government, less FDIs, right? I think just generally the companies and maybe Catalyst and the likes of the organisations, Invest NI, getting a bit more excitement. I think we need a few more success stories.
Yeah, put us on the map, definitely.
Keno's great, for example. There's some other success stories we talked about earlier, but there's no one here that's, like, for me, a sexy brand. Keno's is not. No offense to Keno's, people might watch this, but like thinking like a Sydney, right? Atlassian was their main initial one, and that just spawns so much stuff, because Atlassian, like, it's quite a boring, like, what do you do? Dev tools, right? It's not like they're particularly doing a really cool thing per se, unless you're a developer. But they had the brand, the cool brand, and Mike Hampbridge, who still had his baseball cap on, his long hair, and he'd just be cool. It was a really marketable story, and I think then attracted a lot of people to get excited about that. So I think we need a big win here, but with a marketable brand that can then foster the ecosystem around them. I think also fostering ecosystems isn't great here. I think the bigger guys could do more to help the people around them, be it resource, training, whatever. I don't think there's really a great collaborative environment here at the minute.
I'm optimistic that the FDIs will spin out some entrepreneurs that might become extra entrepreneurs.
That would be the hope.
I'm optimistic.
That would be the hope, right?
And I'm also optimistic that the companies that are scaling now will then, as you say, grow and have big news stories and come back and help the new guys. So I think we're on the cusp of something exciting.
I hope so. I think the best thing I would like to see as part of the FDI arrangements, that there's a commitment to doing X, Y, or Z, and all that, like, gives back. Because at the minute it's just, we'll give you money to put heads in and pay salaries. right? So I think there's a role there to be played to foster that better.
I think visa schemes as well, a nice Northern Irish specific visa scheme would be brilliant, so we could bring in fresh talent to energize what's happening out there. That would be on my wish list, but never asked me.
Jenny, we've got a couple more questions in the chat here.
Yep.
Michael Doherty, do you want to unmute and ask the question? If that's okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thanks for that. What was the question? So it was really just around getting your first customer. If you go all the way back to almost day one, did you have a lead customer, or how did you find that lead customer? And then now, how do you find your customers? You know, what's the strategy you use to get new customers?
Yeah, so the first customer was actually our ex-employer. So that was easy. We sort of had them lined up from day one, and we brought them on the journey. So we talked to them early and said, right, you have this pain point, great, we're going to go and solve it. We'll come back to you. But bring them on the journey. That's largely how we acquire customers today or retain. So when you have a nascent tech stack, you often don't do what the customer wants, right? You might do a bit of it. So for us, it's about great, listen to them, let us think about that, let us keep you updated, and then we keep them warm, right? And we basically make them feel part of the development, so it makes them feel like we're actually built something for them. Obviously, what we build is for everyone, but I think that's a big thing when you're young. We basically got a roadmap, and then we hear things and stuff can move around the roadmap. But it's like, if these people want this, it goes into the cohort. Then as we start to get toward development, we engage them all and say, hey, great, we're going to start building this for you, and give us some more insights. You want to beta test it for us? And ooh, I would be a beta tester. That's cool. Bring them on the journey. How we more broadly get customers today? Lots of ways. We're lucky. We have a very omni-channel approach. We've got lots of networks that we can pivot into. We've got accountants and bookkeepers that can sell our product to their clients. We've got accounting software partners that we API into, and we can go via them and their marketplaces. We've got then all of those bigger, they've got ISVs and VARs and resellers all over the world that, again, we can plug into. So we're lucky in that we have existing scalable networks to plug into. And then we have obviously traditional stuff, BDM work, digital events. So we run the gamut in terms of how we approach our go-to-market acquisition.
I think that's one of the key challenges, is understanding what is your ideal customer and how are you going to reach them, and using partners to reach them as a distribution network. As B2B makes real sense in terms of accounting partners and distributors, resellers.
One of our hardest challenges, to be honest, like in the early days it was easy because we would do it hospo, and that was easy because we just go narrow and focus. But now we do really struggle with how do we speak to the masses but still speak to the individual. We haven't cracked the formula yet, to be honest. We still work through it, but it's nice that you can go to everyone, but it does present challenges.
But I think it's that change in marketing now. Is used to be B2B, you wouldn't really think about B2C tactics and techniques, but increasingly you're saying you have to personalize to such an extent, because key decision makers are now so visible. It's not like the older days where you had my first sales job, you'd phone up one person and you'd try and network your way through the organization to see who the key decision maker is. That takes 5 minutes on LinkedIn as you map your way through, but that's the guy to go to, and then you have to personalize it. So you marketeers, Jenny, you have to think of a new way to do this.
Any other questions there, David?
No, that's everything. Thanks very much.
I have a question for Chris. I'm interested in terms of decision making. Whenever you have lots of different opportunities that you could pursue, whether it's diversifying into other sectors or going into other geographies, how do you try and prioritize opportunities, and how do you measure sort of success or failure of them? Get out quick if it's not working the way you thought.
Good question. How do we? So if we're thinking in terms of like expansion and do we go into new verticals, new markets? So it starts off with market research base level. What's the TAM in the geography? What's the TAM sliced by vertical? Stuff like that. And we literally have a full set of data and decks in terms of country segments. So we know whereas in theory, the biggest opportunity, but the biggest TAM doesn't necessarily mean the actual biggest opportunity offer. So we take the quantitative and then we put some qualitative over it, and actually do some insights on the ground and research and conversations to understand, does that big TAM actually present the opportunity? So that's sort of initial data analysis. And then we obviously break down to the revenues, the primary thing we think about, but there's other things. So like, for example, thinking about the value of the business overall, to have our product available in America will double, treble the valuation of the business, because in theory we can go to investors and we're ready to go to America. So we could do that and get America ready, not going to get any revenue potentially from it. We might lose revenue, but overall that's the thing to do. So I think you got to balance the revenue component short term, but also with what's strategically in the best interests of the business in the long run. And then there's also balancing out, particularly in like partner channels and things like that. There's like conflicts. And so for us, it's speak to the partner, like politics. Oh, geez, politics and partners are desperate. But for us, it's like you have to actually go and speak, right? Because every partner, or if you go to their website, will say, "This is what we do, and here's your opportunity." It's all great. Only you have to go and have a chat, say like, and I sort of cut through the mustard and say like, "Give it to me straight. What's the crack here?
What do you really do?
Are you really going to engage with us? What are you actually going to give us?" I'd appreciate being transparent. If you're going to tell me X, Y, and Z, but we're just going to go in the bucket of 1,000 partners, I'll basically get a listing and you're never going to really hear it. So I just try and get a good honest answer from them, and then try and pick the ones that really want to engage. But I think part of that from a partner angle is you've got to really sell the value prop, because we go to a partner and they'll be like, first reaction will be, like Sage Intact, for example, the ERP system that we're about to launch with. We've already got 3 AP partners. Don't need you. That was actually under NDA. Not go too deep into that. But anyway, conceptually, if it wasn't Sage Intact, you go, you have a chat, like we have 3 AP, we're going to need another one. It's like, hold on, like, okay, we're your AP partners, right? And this is the UK team I'm speaking to. It's this guy, and it's in the US. Okay, right? So where do you get your local support? Well, not really. And what do they specifically do? Well, they do AP. Okay, can we just talk through what AP is? Bring them on the journey. Very basic tactics. There's that partner and that. There's that software and us. Here's a little matrix of what they do, what we do, and then try and differentiate to each other. This is what we do, this is what they do. These guys do things well, not slagging off the product, but we do certain things for different verticals, different markets. And without having us right now, you're not giving your customers the best solution that they could have.
Proposition. Yeah.
Try and sort of work around it that way.
Good question.
Answer your question, Rich?
Yeah,
sure.
good. Cheers.
There's another question from Michael here, if there's still time.
Yep, let's go for it.
Sorry, I could ask you questions all day, but okay. I'll get paid later for asking them, maybe. Can you go back to USA again? Because that's an area I'm interested in. You said that a lot of companies fail in the USA and come back licking their wounds. What are the main reasons, or is it just a variety of reasons, or what advice would you get to somebody trying to break into the USA market?
So all the reasons. US is very litigious for a start. It's very expensive to do business. Just everything about business, the legals, the commercials, the contracts, the insurances, the people, the facilities, the travel, right? Because America is in effect 50 odd countries, right? Particularly in our industry, if you go into you do something for California, that doesn't mean you're ready to go to the next state. You've got to then work out. And people buy differently in different states. There's different, sales marketing. It's really different per state, right? Yeah. Different cultures, and you got a lot of states. Then California, a lot of Hispanic and Mexican influences, right? So you got to think about have you your products now do different languages, and you got to then put in teams that sell and can speak their language and stuff like that. So. Those are some of the reasons, the cost, and it's really hard to, if you're in an industry where you need to sell in person, you get a lot of flights, a lot of ground to cover, right? So the guys that I've seen do it well, to give you advice on what's worked well, is pick a state. Start with a state, typically California or up in the Northeast, right? Because they're your 2 main ones, or maybe Central, if that's your type of client. So where are your main target client? Where's your least competition and saturation? And just take a state, assume that's your America for the first 6-12 months. And then my advice is go on a low budget. See, a lot of people go, this is great, look, this is the opportunity, let's hire 50 staff overnight and start to spend, $1 million a year on marketing. Just not ready, right? Product's not ready. There's so many things to learn. So I would say go slow. Our approach is going to be put 1 or 2 people into an office in Canada, for example, and do a lot of sort of remote stuff and just learn for 6 months. Back to your question about going fast, a lot of people take money in, and the money from the VC is to do America, and they say 50 million quid, go and spend 50 million quid in the next 18 months, and 80% of that needs to be spent in America. You're going to burn most of it. So for me, go slow, learn a bit, and then just ramp it up over time, and focus on a particular state, probably the main advice. And sorry, last thing, don't try and fly people in who don't know the market. Get locals. Maybe do a hybrid. Like my plan, be send someone from here and then get locals, because it's just such a different market. I was there for 18 months and I still didn't have a clue after 18 months. I'm still learning. Just very, very different. So make sure you get local with experience in your sector, ideally. I have never seen it work when you fly people in and just expect them to copy what they've done in Australia, right?
Fantastic. Thanks so much, guys, for the questions from online and from in the room. Thank you, Chris, for spending the time chatting through your journey. As always, if anybody needs accounts payable, check out Lightyear. And would you open to anybody giving you a chat or a message after?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Today?
Yeah,
Where can I get in touch?
The best way to get me is probably you can LinkedIn me,
LinkedIn,
email me. I'll share my email. It's fine. Happy to, I'm very happy to have a chat with anyone. Time, just doing challenges, give me a bit of leeway. Give me a bit of a heads up. I'm relatively busy, so you might give me in a week's notice. But yeah, for sure, I'll slot something in. And if anybody wants any advice on any questions, or even if you want to drop me a note or an email, if it's just something like one thing you're grappling with, no problem whatsoever.
Really appreciate your time, and it was fantastic to hear like your journey. That's come all this way. I'm glad to look forward to see the future and what's coming next.
Me too.
And thank you everybody for joining online and in person. And we're hopefully doing startup stories on a monthly basis like this, in hybrid and online. If the experience has been good, let us know. If we can improve it, also let us know. Our next event will be at the start of March here in Ray's offices. So we'll be putting the dates up shortly and look forward to seeing you then. And at the end of February, we're running a hybrid Raise event, a startup pitching event down at the Dark Horse down here in Commercial Court for startups that are hoping to pitch to a room of investors, early stage, that early seed funding stage. So exciting times. And thank you so much for joining us over your lunchtime. I appreciate taking the time out. And we'll finish up there if you're happy enough.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Cheerio.
Thank you.
Pleasure, guys. Thank you. It was useful. Good luck with all your ventures. Great crack, isn't it?